This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, February 22nd, 2021, and the time is 7:00 p.m. We are present this evening in our new school board meeting room located at Northfield Public Schools District Offices, formerly Longfellow School. In accordance with Governor Walz's Stay Safe plan, this room has been set up in accordance with the plan's social distancing guidelines. In addition, all those present at the meeting will be wearing face coverings for the duration of the meeting. Also attending tonight's board meeting via teleconference are Aaron Bailey, Director of Community Education, Jim Kulseth, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Hope Langston, Director of Instructional Services, and Val Murdesdorf, Director of Finance. This meeting is open to the public via live stream. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Okay, Dr. Hillman, there were a few items in the table file.
Yes, when we take a look at the table file today, so you can just give me 1 second to get there. In today's table file, we had an update on the Legislative Action Committee, and then we have a gift agreement, and we have some increased changes of assignment, a leave of absence, and some retirements and resignations. So that's the table file for this evening.
Okay, just one correction, the committee report was Northfield Board.
Committee report, Northfield Board, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so there are no objections. We'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Moved by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now have opportunity for residents, property and business owners, parents, students, and employees of the Northfield Public School District to address the board. To accommodate the public comment portion of our meeting, we made available on the district's website the ability for the public to submit feedback to the board via email by 5 p.m. today. All submissions that follow the district policy regarding public comment will be read by myself, board chair. Tonight we have 3 public comment submissions. First public comment is from Catherine Clements. Please consider honoring our Native Americans' history they lived and the respect they are due as you consider renaming schools in our communities. Please consider postponing any renaming to give the process due diligence. Thank you. Our second is from Matt Rohn. There has been an excellent suggestion that the renaming of at least one of the schools be a Dakota name. Inyen Bosnada would be a good choice. It's the name of what is currently named the Cannon River. Thank you. Our last public comment is from Sukata Owens. I'm glad this name change is on the table. Whatever name you choose amongst the 3 names you are considering, she's referring to Sibley, please consider translating it into the Wapakute as part of the land acknowledgement efforts of the city. I also like the suggestion that Matt Rohn has recently made. It is the Dakota name of our Cannon River. Thank you. Those are the 3 public comment portions of the evening. So we can move on to items for discussion and report. Tonight our first item for discussion.
We do have some announcements.
Oh, I'm sorry, why do I keep doing that?
No problem.
It's like the second time I've done that. No, that's my fault. Announcements and recognition. Sorry, Dr. Hillman.
You bet. So the first announcement is we're getting used to our new space. In our old space, we always had to be a little further back from the microphone or it would give us all sorts of feedback. But these microphones are such that what we want to do is you can actually, if you want to make sure they're away from you, you can move it away. But then actually move it really close to your mouth so that you are able to get to the speaker. So just don't be afraid about getting close to it. In the old days, the old system, you wanted to be further back. But here what I would just recommend is you actually pull it down to right about here so that you're speaking directly. You can hear the difference in terms of the speaker system. So we just wanted to give that announcement as we learn our new space. And then this week I would also like to share that the Minnesota School Boards Association has set February 22nd through the 26th as Minnesota School Board Recognition Week to build awareness and understanding of the vital function elected school board members play in our society. And Northfield Public Schools is joining other public school districts from across the state to celebrate School Board Recognition Week to honor local board members for their commitment to Northfield and our students. Strong schools help build strong communities, and our board devotes countless hours to make sure our schools are helping every child learn at a higher level. So it's my great pleasure on the behalf of the school district, Northfield School District, to thank all of our board members for the work that you've done and the work that you'll continue to do. And this is a week where MSBA recognizes you for the hard work that you do for students. I'd also like to mention that the American Association of School Administrators have designated this week also as Public Schools Week. And so all week long you'll see social media posts from across the country with the hashtag Public School Proud. And we are, of course, proud of the role that public schools play as the foundation of a democratic republic needing an educated citizenry. And so this week we also make sure that we don't hide our lights under a bushel basket, as the old saying goes, and that we make sure that people know that public schools do an excellent job serving Minnesota students and students across the country. So MSBA this week is School Board Recognition Week, as well as this week being Public Schools Week across the country. Those are the announcements for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hillman. Sorry about that. Anything else board members would like to add? Okay, now we can proceed with items for discussion and report. And our first item for discussion is Portage Beyond the Pandemic. And we welcome Director of Instructional Services, Hope Langston, and Dr. Hillman for that presentation.
Yes, so I'm going to just give a frame, and then I'm going to have Hope Langston share the work that we're currently doing to prepare for what we're calling Portage Beyond the Pandemic. So as you all know, on July 31st of last year, Governor Walz announced the Safe Learning Plan that included a requirement that all school districts offer an all-the-time online program for students. And so we had about a month, if you think about it, to make sure. We had started to prepare something, we heard something was coming, but really we had to prepare in about a month. And we had no idea how many people would be interested, and Hope will share some of the numbers of the number of people that we've had participating in our Portage All the Time online program this year. And as we move ahead, we often hear in the public about people who, of course, can't wait to get back to school in person every day. We look forward to some normalcy. But we'll also tell you that we have had many students who have been very successful across the state in an all-the-time online learning model. So almost every school district in the state is looking at how do we keep online learning, all-the-time online learning, or a combination of all-the-time online learning and maybe some blended learning moving forward. And so the state of Minnesota, in order to be able to do that in a non-pandemic year, you have to achieve a certain designation from the state to be considered an online learning provider. We understand that the Department of Education this week will provide us guidance, beginning guidance as to whether we will be required yet again next year to offer an all-the-time online program for families who would like to have that. And they're also going to give us an update on whether or not school districts will need to complete the online program application if they're only going to serve their own students. Under the current rules, even if you're only planning to serve your own students, you still need to complete the application and become an officially authorized provider. Hope Langston has been an integral part of building this all-the-time online system. She and Carrie Duba, one of our instructional coaches, are managing the day-to-day work of our Portage program. And we don't have a presentation for you tonight. You had a narrative in your document that Hope is just going to walk through how we are progressing toward completing that online application. We were full steam ahead, and as we got into it, we said, you know what, we need to slow down and get some additional stakeholder feedback. So Hope, I'm going to ask you to start by talking about where we're at in that process and how we're getting stakeholder feedback and what you see to be the timeline.
Okay, good evening everyone. I'm happy to be here over Zoom to give you an update on where we are at for our Portage program in the 21-22 school year.
Hold on 1 second, Hope. I got a problem with the audio here. Just give me a second. Okay, say it now.
Good evening everyone. Can you
Much
hear
better.
me
Yep, you're good.
now? All right. I'm happy to be here to give you an update on where we are in our Portage 21-22 planning process. As Matt said, the application to become an online provider is extraordinarily comprehensive. And we've been working on this for a number of weeks now. I want to give a shout out to the Portage staff because they really are the people who are in the trenches every day making Portage happen this year. And as you can see from the narrative, we have a large group of secondary Portage staff who are very much participating in the planning process right now. The goal would be to bring in an elementary group once this group is done, and we're doing what's called a sprint, where we have met for 6 days straight. We have seen presentations from 2 of the 3 vendors that we are looking at, again, just to make sure. As Matt said last summer, it was really a very quick build, and we want to make sure we take the time to gather input this year and take a look at the major players in the online markets in this country. We did get 148 responses to our parent preference form. About half, a little less than half, rated their likelihood to return to Portage in the 21-22 school year as a 3 or a 4 on a 4-point scale. And you know, it's interesting, the factors weighing into the decision for these families really are centered on the COVID outlook for the fall and whether or not vaccinations have been rolled out to both adults and children. So the virus continues to weigh heavily on our families and their choice for schooling. We do have parents who are going to be part of our focus group, so again, we can get feedback both at the secondary and the elementary level. So at this point, what we're doing is going through the application components with our secondary staff, and they are being very thoughtful and very helpful in their input into each of the sections of the application. And so I really appreciate the work that they are doing and the time they are committing to helping us write a really strong application and build a even better program for next year. At the elementary level, you know, that program does not involve an outside vendor, so I expect that that piece of the application will run a little bit more quickly. There's just a lot to think about at the secondary level. But at this point, we are really pleased with how the process is going and expect to have this wrapped up by the end of next week. And then we'll move forward. The state legislation says that MDE has 90 days to respond to our submitted application. Oftentimes it's with some feedback about things we need to tweak, but we are looking forward to completing the process.
So the purpose of this presentation, very short, it's really an update, right? I've talked with you before about our intent to be able to continue forward with some kind of all-the-time online and blended approach. So our point tonight was just to share with you where we're at, give you an update, and then offer you an opportunity to ask any questions.
Excellent, thank you, Hope and Dr. Hillman. So, questions, comments, board members have. Tom?
Thanks for the presentation. So this is online learning. Is it distance learning, or is it online such that they could take a class or two in the school that maybe isn't offered? Or are those two separate things?
So this year, Tom, we have students taking courses only online. Now next year, as we look ahead to what this model might look like for Northfield, we know that there is interest within some of our families that they be able to mix some online courses with in-person courses. This year, it's just with 650 kids in the program, it really was not possible to accommodate that type of flexibility this year. But that is certainly something we are looking at to include next year.
And I think the way that we envision that is really kind of, I envision it as three different possibilities, Tom, and I'm going to use just some numbers to, I could see it being an all the time online component, that I'm going to do it just like I did this year. I'm going to only be off campus, and I could come in to participate in athletics and some other things, but I might just be all the time online. I'd still be a Northfield School student, be taking them all the time online. I could participate in activities, etc., but I'm still doing it 100% online. Then I would see where, when I talk about using the word blended, if we hadn't had a hybrid learning model this year, I would have been calling this a hybrid model, but we can't do that because that will confuse people. I see a couple of different options. One where your course load is more heavily tilted to being on campus in person. So at a 7-period day at the high school, conceptually, you could have an option where you could take 5 classes in person and 2 classes online. Now for those 2 online classes, you might just have 1 period of the day where you go down to the media center or to another open space to do your online work for the day. In some cases, it might be that you're going to do that from home. We're still working on, but really more heavily on the in-person. Then the reverse, where maybe I am taking 5 of my 7 courses online and I'm doing all those at home, but I'm coming in for maybe a chemistry class that has a lab, or I'm doing something with music or art. And in that case, Northfield has a strong history of having a strong homeschool population. And we have a sharing agreement where homeschool students can come in to take up to 2 classes, basically, each day. And this might be a possibility where some of our homeschool families may still have something that looks like homeschool, but maybe they do enroll as 100% students. They take the online content that we're able to provide, and then they also augment it with those couple of classes online. So when we think about it, that's the way I have been thinking about it. It's the way Hope has been thinking. How can we provide that kind of flexibility so that some of the classes that we offer could be things that are things that we might only have 1 or 2 students interested in, and we could never offer something like that on campus if we could even find someone to be able to teach it. So those are the things that we're working through, and those are the things that you need to have the specialized permission moving forward. Everybody was granted the ability to do all the time online this year, but moving forward we'll need to have greater special dispensation. And I talk with my hands, so I have to get used to not hitting the microphone as we work here.
Could students take more courses than 7 in a day if they so chose?
Hope, what do you think about that?
It's really hard to hear the questions. Could you
got
repeat
it.
that, please?
I'll repeat it, Hope. So Tom's question was, could we conceivably have someone take more than 7 classes at a time?
Yes, that is possible. It's also what we have seen this year, not commonly, but we have seen it as students finishing their year-long or semester courses ahead of time and then selecting another course to add to their schedule. So yes, there is flexibility in that course number for students who need that.
And I think our experience this year is we would also want to be very conscientious about how we counsel students to do that. Early on, if you remember, we had to take a pause in secondary portage for a few days for a couple of different reasons, and one of it was workload. Online learning is a very rigorous, product-based kind of coursework. And so one of the first things that we did to help relieve some of the pressure that families were feeling was we actually had kids go down from 7 courses to take 6, or in some cases, maybe even 5 for a period of time. So we're learning, what's the appropriate piece, and what Hope described, I think, is the better approach, where if you finish something, then we could consider adding something else. But if you're an achiever, and you think, I can do 7 or I can do 8 courses, what we've learned is that actually very few kids can keep up with that workload. So we want to make sure that we're hitting that right mark and using what we learned this year.
Thank you.
Amy?
So I have several questions. The first question is there any sort of minimum number of students that we would need, and does that vary by grade level?
So Hope, the question is, are there the minimum number of level of students to participate?
Well, I think with Val on the line, we're all looking to break even, right, in our cost of the program versus the revenue. So that would be my goal.
right?
Okay, so that's all financially, we'd have to figure out how that would work. How fluid would it be for people to move between online learning for a semester and then back into the school system? So, for instance, those students whose parents are traveling for a semester abroad, would they be able to flow back and forth easily?
So we have learned a lot from that scenario this year. Again, the initial guidance from the state was that we had to let students join Portage at any time during the school year. I think it was in December, they clarified that because it was causing a lot of trouble for school districts to have these enrollment shifts happening, could be daily in some cases. So we are able to now identify some windows and student enrollment windows. And then in terms of moving back from Portage to in-person, again, we are handling those on a case-by-case basis now that the semester switch has happened. We made it very clear from the outset that if you committed to Portage, you were committed to staying in for the semester. But we all know that sometimes family situations change and family needs change, and we look at those on a case-by-case basis. We are still actually getting requests to move into Portage. They sort of trickle in here and there. And again, we work with the counselors and the principals to make sure that that is the best decision for that family. But ultimately, we are here to serve our students and we want to meet our student needs. And so we are trying to put that at the forefront of every decision that we make about enrollment during these off times.
That's a great answer. I like that answer. How about the ALC? How would this program impact the ALC? Would it work with the ALC? Would it steal students from the ALC? How do you see the two connecting and relating?
So Daryl has been instrumental from the start because he had the most experience with Odysseyware. So he has been very helpful as we work through some of the idiosyncrasies of Odysseyware. But his program really operates based on the needs of the ALC students. So we don't have overlap at this point. We are not planning to have overlap. It's certainly something we could consider, but he's really got a well-running situation with his use of Odysseyware right now, and he's involved. He's on the planning team with us, and it's certainly something we can consider as we look at different vendors. But right now, we have not addressed folding the ALC into the Northfield Schools Portage program.
And my last question is, would we open this to students outside the district?
So that is something that, again, I think we are going to need to see what the state decides in terms of moving forward as an online provider. Right now, if you apply and you are accepted and approved as an online provider in the state of Minnesota, you can welcome students from anywhere in the state. Now, they may, as Matt said, they may change that and have different application requirements for those districts who choose to only enroll from their student body. I think that's something we will look at as we move through this application process. And at this point, no definitive decision has been made about enrolling kids from other districts.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for your report. I was just thinking, I know you don't have a magic wand, but then again, maybe you do. When post-pandemic, just from the things and the, for lack of a better expression, the paradigm shift that's going on, I mean, you see such a difference of just having the hybrid model, it's going to stick and stay, and it's just a matter of How much percentage-wise do you really think that somebody could do in the hybrid model versus in person? Is there a percentage in your mind to think that might work long-term, or what the current trend is, and not kind of a fad, but do you have any thoughts in the future of what the trend would be?
So are you asking about, again, it's a little bit hard to hear, what percentage of our population do you think might be interested in this model of instruction?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that our Portage program attracted about 17% of our student population this year. That is much lower than what the inner-ring suburbs were seeing. They were in the 20s, 20 to 25% of their student body choosing 100% online learning. So I think that 17%, if that's what we saw in a pandemic year, a full pandemic year, I would guess that we're going to be at or slightly below that moving forward. But that being said, if we build in this flexibility where you can take some of your courses online and go in person for others, I think actually we will see those numbers rise, because I think it's a chance for us to offer some programming that, because of our district size, we're unable to do so, and in which case we may see quite a number of kids choosing to do a mix of online and in-person learning.
Thank you.
Other questions? Corey?
Yeah, hi, Hope. Question about funding. Is it expected that the funding per pupil will remain consistent whether students in Portage or on campus? Because I can see the argument made that a student who's not using transportation or maybe other services will not cost as much to educate.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Right now, our understanding, I'm going to ask Val to weigh in, I am not aware of any of the approved online learning providers who get less than the basic formula. So I'm not aware of you get the money for the student regardless. Now, if it becomes something that's more ubiquitous across the state, maybe the state has some discussions about the funding formula. The one thing I would caution is I think sometimes people perceive online programming to be so much less expensive. And it's a different kind of expense. Are there efficiencies? Certainly. But what we know is that actually one of the things that we learned in Portage is that, for example, a full-time secondary teacher can probably they can't handle what they normally would handle in a regular classroom. So your actual people power could actually potentially need to be more, depending on the program. And there's a variety of things. There's some other there are some other strategies that can be used with that. But the equipment and the infrastructure and all of those kinds of things are things that are not cheap either. Now, we were very fortunate as a school district. We've been investing in this infrastructure since 2012, right, in terms of when our students first started to get their iPads and things like that. But if you think about it, if you were trying to build this from the ground up right now, the expense would be pretty significant. We had been ahead of the curve by having the devices, by thinking of some of those kinds of things ahead of time. So while yes, transportation is a significant cost, there are other costs that you then incur by doing an all-the-time online program than not. So I can't say yet whether or not it is less expensive to run. In some cases, I think it's probably the same, and in some cases less, in some cases more, depending on the circumstance. Val, I haven't seen any change in funding basic formula. Have you?
No, I have not.
Tom?
To follow up sort of what Amy and had asked about, if students outside our school district were to participate in our online program, would they count as a student for our district?
Yes, they would.
Other questions, comments? Claudia?
Thank you for presenting. I'm excited about this program because I think it's an easy way to address mental health issues for a lot of our students. I had a question about the curriculum. Is it in isolation from what's happening in a particular grade classroom? Is it in isolation from what's happening in a particular classroom? For example, if they're going over a certain genre in an English class, would the students in that grade in Portage also be doing that? Or is the curriculum on Portage completely different than the classroom grade curriculum?
Claudia, that's a great question. All of the coursework, whether you're in person or in Portage, is aligned to the Minnesota state standards. That being said, what is actually used to teach those standards can be different than what is being used in the brick and mortar schools. So next year, what the teachers are talking about, and I think it's a really intriguing idea, is creating some content that does overlap. And so that just involves a level of customization, which they did begin doing this year. But when you are using an online vendor, this year we used Odysseyware, next year we are considering one of 3 vendors. One is the parent company of Odysseyware. Then you really are using the content that they have developed for that platform. But we think that customization piece is very, very important, and that's where we could add some content that would allow an overlap with what's happening in the high school or the middle school.
At the elementary school, the elementary school is very much in line with what's happening on campus. Talk about that briefly, Hope.
Yeah, so the elementary school looks more like a traditional distance learning model in that the teachers are running synchronous meetings periodically throughout the day, and the Portage teachers also participate in the critical core work with their grade level peers across the district. So we knew that was really important given the movement of kids in and out of the program, that people were generally covering the same content at around the same time so that there wouldn't be issues created when students moved back from the classroom or moved into Portage. So there has been collaboration between the Portage teachers and the classroom teachers in the buildings to make sure that everyone's using a scope and sequence that is generally on track with each other.
All right, great questions. Tom, do you have another question?
Yeah, sorry for other questions. To
No, that's
follow
fine.
up on what Claudia, you mentioned mental health. You know, part of being a student and growing up is the social emotional part. And if you're at home isolated, and for some people that might work, but you know, the social emotional and the mental health, I think, also has to be a big component of this in addition to the academics.
Yeah, Tom, and what I would say is that what we've seen is that, and I think what you're seeing across the country as people talk about this option moving forward, I think as with all things, it comes back to your why, right? So right now, many people have chosen our all the time online because of concerns about the virus, right? And the issues of mental health and social emotional learning are pervasive through society because we have not been able to do the things that we normally do in community, right? We know that is something across the board. Remember, we're trying to build this for the future, for post-pandemic. And so what we see is if you are making that choice, not out of my concern about the virus, right? But because of my preferred learning style, my parents' schedule, and we might be doing some kind of family piece where we're going to be across the world for a semester, it could be that I'm in a circumstance where my own mental health is such that I can firmly engage in my academics, but I might not be able to do that in the hyper-social setting of the traditional school environment. So I think one of the things we're learning is there's a real difference between what we're doing now and what we're building for post-pandemic. Because frankly, we know that a lot of people made this selection because we did not know a lot about the virus. So I think that the why you select a program like this is really important. And the flexibility to be able to say if I am ready to come back, to the brick and mortar school, that option is then available. So I think that those pieces are different based upon why you make that selection. And then as we continue to build it forward, we are looking at how do we continue to provide those kinds of mental health, social, emotional guidance, counseling, health services, child, all of those kinds of supports that you would have here in that kind of program as well. This is going to be a problem for me. I'm moving up a little bit.
Amy?
I think this is a very exciting possibility. I know one of the things we've been able to do this year is provide the learning coaches to help students get through it, especially with the older students. And I'm wondering, I love the idea of making a wide variety of electives available to our students. And my question is, what if some student decides that they want to take Russian or Greek or some other topic that we don't have any expertise in our faculty and staff, for? Will that be a problem? Do we feel like we need to have expertise in a topic that the student is taking, or can the learning coaches still take care of it?
Did you hear that, Hope?
I think so. So, and you're asking, what if people take courses that we do not have teachers licensed in that area?
Yes.
Okay, so that, one of the benefits of a company like Edgenuity is that they offer things that we cannot offer. One of the things we would then commit to is hiring their Minnesota licensed teacher to teach and grade that course. And in fact, moving forward, that is required. You have to have the Minnesota licensed teacher managing that class. So they do offer some language courses and many electives that we don't currently offer. So again, it is one way to build breadth in our course offerings without having to provide the actual licensed teacher. We would just use theirs.
And that's one of the things that the planning committee is looking at is, how much of a course catalog do you want to include in your program? So there may be things that we might be able to have access to, but we may say that's not something that we're interested, at this time in pursuing. So as we said, we're in the middle stages of planning, and even if you plan, we still have to have the application approved. So there's a lot of steps between now and then, and all of these questions that we are working through, we will have questions like this for the next couple of years as you start to see how this shifts. My prediction is, because I am an amateur futurist, I think you're going to see a lot of people who are yearning for what they thought was a system that occurred before the pandemic. And for as much difficulty as some people have had with distance learning all the time online, as people come back into the traditional structure, I think we're going to see a lot of that to begin with, across the country. And then I think we're going to see people say, you know what, I really like this part of the distance, I really like that part. So I think this is going to be a multi-year change, that we are going to see society shift. And I think that public schools have always led the way with innovation. If you think in Minnesota, we had the first charter school law in the country, public school choice. I think you're going to see public schools lead the way again in terms of providing an equitable, all-the-time online experience, which isn't always necessarily what happens when we talk about a for-profit entity. So I think Minnesota schools are prepared to lead the nation in this, and really thinking through what's the right mix and how do we provide a high-quality experience for everyone who wants it by a high-quality licensed teacher.
Great, thank you. Hope, thank you. I mean, a lot of interest, obviously, the board members excited about the process. It was really interesting reading just the key parts of the application, just a ton of work that your team has to do. It was interesting, last Wednesday in the Star Trib, they did an article. It was actually the front page of the A section talking about online learning may outlast pandemic, was the headline, and it talked about the number of school districts that had already put in applications were 15, and they had expected 25 more, and that within the week or so. So it'll be interesting to see if they can hold to that 90-day turnaround. Because I think about, being able to tell families that that's an option, and obviously giving them the opportunity to consider whether that's going to be something that they want to pursue. And I think it was really interesting. I started looking around on some of the, Blue Sky Academy comes to mind, right? Because they've been doing this for 20 years, and I think a lot of the key parts of MDE's application really hit what they really showcase in terms of unique approach for students, and being able to offer those kinds of, really speak to the interest of the student. So, as Amy talks about Russian and those are the things they herald. We're able to really authorize that individualized instruction for whatever the student's interested in. But I really like the way you focus as well, and MDE asked about the relationships that the students and the teachers will have. So there's just a lot of aspects that MDE covers, but boy, it's intense application. So thank you to you. There's absolutely an amazing team that's assembled to do this work, and we're really looking forward to hearing about the process and how it moves through. So thank you for your time and your work, Hope.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. That was great. So our next item for discussion is Val Mergesdorf will discuss the 2021-22 debt service fund budget. Welcome, Val.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue my budget presentation streak I've got going. Tonight we're going to talk about the debt service fund. So the debt service fund is really probably one of our most straightforward funds. We are required by statute to levy 105% of our principal and interest payments for any of our voter approved or other debt that we have outstanding. So we do that as part of the levy certification that we did that final certification in December. We also get some state credits. The most notable one is the LTFM aid, and actually the aid credit that helps reduce the tax burden on long-term debt for school district for agricultural properties. We do have two bonds where they didn't actually require voter approval because the revenue actually comes from either our operating capital or our long-term facility maintenance revenue, which is in the general fund. So what happens is we levy for the debt payments, everything gets paid through debt service, but then there's an offsetting revenue reduction in our general fund, so that the is revenue neutral for the taxpayers, if that makes sense. And then other financing sources is just anything else that might come up in a given year. The refunding bond will jump out like a sore thumb. Each year we do those because it's usually a pretty significant amount. And the capitalized interest that we did for the construction bonds, those are the kinds of things that will periodically show up in there. And then the expenditures are really straightforward. We have our principal and interest schedules, so it's very easy to project what's coming up. And then we have a little bit of just annual service fees for processing bond payments and those sorts of things. And then the other financing uses are just the opposite, basically, for the sources. It's those kind of one-time, out of the ordinary type payments. You can go to the next slide. So the revenue summary, as you can see, it's been a little up and down. And again, that's one of the reasons we have the other sources is it really pulls out those one-time things. So you can see overall, our local property tax levy has been very consistent year over year. For the 21-22 school year, again, the levy is already complete, so we know that that $5.3 million number is already locked in. We're anticipating a small decline in our interest on investments, just with the current market environment. And then the state of Minnesota, we see about $650,000 annually in the various credits that I talked about. So overall, we're looking at about a little over $6 million for the revenue for debt service, which is pretty consistent with what we've seen. You can go to the next one. And then the debt service expenditures, again, very consistent. You will notice that our principal payments are going down, and that is because we are paying off one of our bonds this February, so it will not be a payment next year, and the actual principal payments for the construction bonds will actually start to pick up and kind of fill that in. But this will be a decline for the taxpayers, which will be a great for them to have that. Even though it'll be a small decrease, we will take it where we can get it. Total interest of just over $2 million, and then the annual fees are usually about $7,000. And the bond refunding we did, that $10.7 million, that refunded about 4 years worth of payments from the 2011A and the 2012A bonds that we had. And so those were refunded, and we got a 0.37% interest rate on those in November when we did that, and actually ended up saving the taxpayers about $367,000 over the next 4 years. So we are always looking out for those opportunities when they arise. There are certain rules with the refunding bonds about how often and which types of bonds you can do. And Ellers has been an excellent partner in making sure that we're making the most of those opportunities. You can go to the next slide. So this is just the summary. You can see the fund balance in 18-19 was like 3.9 million, and I'm projecting to be about just shy of 2 million. I would say the $1.5 million to 2 million is typically where we would see this fund, kind of all things considered normal. We did have the capitalized interest included in that fund balance. There was 2.6 million from the construction bonds that we used to help limit the tax impact until we paid off this this other bond that will get paid off this February. So that's kind of why you're seeing that decline in the fund balance, but overall revenue of just over 6 million, expenditures about 5.8, and very, very consistent year over year. We'll go to the next one. So this is all of our outstanding long-term debt. This does not include leases, so I just want to be clear that this is our voter-approved or LTFM operating capital bonds. So we currently have 5 of them outstanding. You can see the refunding bond is that last one there on the bottom that is new. They'll go through 2025. And the November 15th, 2018, that refunding of the 2010, that is the one that will get paid off this coming February. And that will allow a principal for the 2019 bonds. You can see it's about $785,000 for next year. That will jump up a little bit. As a reminder, when we do structure the debt schedules, we try to keep we have a lot of leeway with the way the principal payments go, and we are pretty intentional about ensuring a consistent debt service levy so that we're not having big swings up or down for taxpayers, so they have some level of expectation that it'll be. You can go to the next one. And then this is our maturity schedule. So over the next several years, you can see where our current principal and interest and totals will be. And that total column is really, you can see it's very consistent. It will drop down in 2025 when we pay off the bond. And then again, it's very consistent while we pay off the remainder of the 2019 construction bonds. So $68.7 million in total outstanding debt over the next 18 years. I will gladly take any questions you might have about the debt service fund.
Thank you, Val. Questions, comments? Amy?
Thank you for another clear explanation of the budget. I always appreciate how you explain everything. I just have a question about if there will be an opportunity to refund the 2019 bond at any point, because that seems to be our we were so excited about that interest rate back in 2019, but now it's so much higher than what we're paying on the other bonds. Can we refund it and get a lower rate?
Yes, but not yet. I can get the specifics and get that to you. Typically, they are not refundable for at least 10 years, I think. I know there's some very specific limitations on it. There's windows in which it's allowable and callable. And so I can check with Ellers about the actual specifics, but it's usually I would say at least 10 years. But I can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Other questions or comments? None? Okay. Thank you, Val. All right, we will move on to the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year plan. Val, and is Jim Kulseth joining us? I apologize, Jim Kulseth, Director, our amazing Director of Buildings and Grounds will not be here, but Val Mertisdorf is here to present the LTFM 10-year plan.
Yes, I let Jim off the hook on this one because we did present this at the last board meeting and there have been no changes. So as a reminder, we have typically asked for approval of the, and this is just the 10-year plan first, or is this the budget as well?
This is, Val, this is just the 10-year plan, just explaining that has to have an individual approval.
Got it. Sorry, I have too many items going on tonight on this agenda. So the LTFM plan, as a reminder, we are required by the Department of Ed to have a 10-year plan approved by the board. They have typically requested it's due by July 31st. And so the first couple of years we had this program, we would do the operating capital and LTFM budget, and then we would come back in the summer and do the 10-year plan. But it makes more sense to talk about it all together since that's when we're doing the numbers and going through everything and getting quotes ready and all of those things. So what's happening is you're approving the 10-year plan, the revenue and expenditures that I'm anticipating. And when that gets approved, when MDE publishes the forms, they have specific forms that we're required to complete, I will take the numbers from this approval, include them on the forms and submit them by the due date, rather than coming back in the middle of summer and bringing up a topic that you haven't talked about for 4 months. And we like to do the timing now just because we're already talking about the budget, so it makes sense. And the approval of the budgets really allow Jim and his team to get a jump start and lock in pricing and schedule the work and do all of those things. The summer is a very busy time for school district contractors, and so the earlier we can do that, the better the odds of getting good pricing and making sure that the timeline meets what we're looking for. So, are there any questions about the 10-year plan?
Well, I'd just like to also point out that in our version of the 10-year plan, when we bring the 10-year plan forward for official approval, one component that we have as part of that is the indoor air quality management plan. And we work with a consulting firm to help us maintain that. So that's something that we have standard as part of the 10-year plan approval to include the indoor air quality plan as well.
Thanks, Matt.
Any questions board members have? Okay. thank you. We have seen time again that strategy to approve that now so that Jim and his team can work on getting those bids has been huge. And we know we have seen where that has benefited the district greatly. So we just hope other districts don't catch on to how smart we are, because then the bidding process will get that much more competitive. But it's just an example of amazing stewardship of saying, you know, 'cause contractors will all of a sudden, you know, be flooded with projects and supply and demand, you know, potentially adjust their pricing. So thank you for that strategy. Okay, so we'll, Val, you'll stay there because the next item for discussion is the budget containment report.
Yes, so as we have discussed when I presented the financial forecast, we did end better than anticipated, and we are moving the formal budget reduction process to next year for a variety of reasons that we discussed. As part of that, we committed as a leadership team to look at if there were things that we could do to contain expenditures or increase revenue in a way to just slow the impact and make any kind of small dent in the process that we're going to have to go through next year. So we have spent some time as a leadership team generating some ideas. And so included in the packet was my narrative about the things that we have come up with so far and have been discussing for your consideration. So the recommended strategies that we are recommending currently are an early retirement incentive. I'm just going to talk about each one as I go. So the early retirement incentive, we did this as a district in 2011. We had 9 retirees at that time participate. When we looked at this, we did an analysis based on our contract groups and really the Northfield Education Association, or the Teachers Union, the Office Employee Association, and the Educational Assistant Association were the contracts that calculated a short-term and a long-term savings for the district under this model. And so you can see in the narrative, obviously each of these groups is different and unique in their contract language, and so each of the proposals is slightly different. But for the Northfield Education Association, we would propose having a minimum of 10 teachers required to participate. And then they have to be eligible for the retirement insurance benefit, which means that they've been with the district for at least 10 years. They do not have to actually enroll in insurance to qualify. They just have to qualify for the benefit, if that makes sense. And the incentive would be $15,000 for 10 to 14 retirees, $17,500 for 15 to 19, and $20,000 if we had 20 or more. And then that would be pro rata based on their FTE at the time of retirement. The office employees would be a $6,000 incentive for year-round and a $5,000 incentive for non-year-round. And then the same thing, they have the retirement insurance benefit. They would need to qualify for that to be eligible. And for educational assistants, $4,000 incentive if they work more than 6.75 hours a day. And $3,500 if they're working 4 hours to 6.75. So when we looked at the costing, if we had the minimum of 10 teachers retire, 5 office employees, and 5 educational assistants, our estimated savings next year would be about $139,000 after the payout of the incentives. And over the next 5 years would be about $1 million. And so we really focused on the groups that had larger longevity payments. So people that have been here for a long time are really receiving a large benefit that people that come in that would be replacing them wouldn't access for several years. So that is one option that we are proposing for your consideration. The second option is exploring advertising revenue in key locations throughout the district. Joel Olson, our activities director, has been thinking about this for a while and is interested in just utilizing this as a way to have an ongoing revenue stream where it'd be an annual kind of membership type scenario. The procedure that we would develop would be in compliance with policy 809.1, which is a recent policy that was brought to the board. So if this is something that the board is interested, we would come with a more formal procedure and those sorts of things if it's a direction that you would like us to pursue. The third one is utilizing an online payment vendor for activities officials. Arbiter Pay is the vendor that we would utilize, and there are several schools in the Big Nine that have been utilizing it probably for a little over a year now. Rochester and Red Wing for sure are, and have had really great things to say about it. I mean, it's a platform that basically we can electronically send a list of any of our officials for any game, and they will pay them directly. The process right now, for us, they fill out a card, the activities office creates a PO, Joel approves the PO, it comes to the finance office, we print a check, we mail a check, we print replacement checks when they get lost. And so when we've analyzed the cost of this service versus all of the staff time and postage and checks and phoner and all of those things, we feel it would be a savings for the district. And we can certainly bring some more formal numbers if this isn't something that you're interested in. I would say the activities office is very excited about this opportunity because they pay a significant number of officials each season. And then the last one, or second to last one, I guess, is utilizing our maintenance system to allocate some staff salaries to LTFM. Currently, we use School Due to track any kind of maintenance tickets. So if you have a request that you need something done, you can put a ticket in, it goes to the custodian in that building, and they'll take care of it. So we could put all of our LTFM projects in the system and have our staff tracking the number of hours where they're directly working on that. And then we can allocate a portion of their salary that's attributed to that project specifically. Jim Kalseth estimated just for our master electrician and our maintenance coordinator that they probably spend at least 30% of their time throughout the year working on LTFM projects. And that would equate to about $60,000 that we could move from general fund salaries to LTFM. So in the general fund, but using that restricted revenue would free up some of that general fund money. And then the last one on my narrative is fees. We've had an in-depth conversation with our leadership team about a few different fees. One is increasing the admission fees for events, for activities events. And the other one is right now the district bears the cost of any online vendor we have. So if you're putting money in your lunch account, paying for a field trip, registering for activities, anytime somebody uses a credit card, there's a fee associated with that program. And so across the district and all of our vendors is about $88,000 a year, and that's including general fund, child nutrition, and community services, community education. And we had a great conversation. Obviously, anytime we're talking about fees, there is concern about how that impacts students and families. And so we are having further conversations before we bring a formal proposal to the board. We want to make sure we have been thoughtful and diligent in making sure that we've thought about it from every perspective. and that it's worth the revenue that would generate for any other impact that might be. We just want to make sure we take the time to be thoughtful about that. So I wanted you to know that that is an ongoing conversation, and we would likely bring anything from that conversation to the March 8th board meeting. So I believe that covers all of my my proposals. So if you have any questions, I will gladly entertain them.
Great, thank you, Bill. So just to reiterate, it does say that you would be asking the board to approve these on March 8th. So a great deal of work still that you have to do in the next 2 weeks. Is that realistic? In terms of, you know, some of these are obviously, you know, more laid out, but when you look at like the advertising revenue and then the fees, certainly there's a lot of work to do there. I mean, you're recognizing and have really highlighted some really key areas where we can look at getting some significant savings. So it's really, really good ideas. But if there is the time to really get the dollars behind the savings before you would look to have us approve it.
Yeah, so I think that the ones that we brought, the way that we look at approval, if we are going to move forward with the early retirement incentive, I did send a message to all district employees last Friday, letting them know that this was going to be considered by the board. In order to really make effective use of something like a retirement incentive, we would need to have that approved by the board so that we can have people, there's an April 1st contractual deadline that people would have to let us know. So that's an example of something that is time sensitive. If you were to approve something like the advertising revenue, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the list of where we're going. Really what we would say is that would authorize us to actually start the process of here are the places, and we would also then, of course, according to that policy, we have to bring it back to you, right, to be able to have those kinds of sponsorships approved. I think as you see the referee one, that, you know, the referee payment, that, you know, seems like a no-brainer, but it's a matter of, and in fact, that's not the kind of thing we would even normally have you approve, but we've been thinking about having you approve these as a chunk. The fees is the one part that we are really having some diligent discussion. As you know, this board has really worked hard over the last several years to eliminate fees in some cases. I was very proud when we eliminated over $80,000 in academic-related fees that we know prevented access for some students. So we are talking through that really school districts have limited ways to get new revenue. The legislature provides us about 70% of our funding. We know the situation that we're in right now in terms of trying to understand how does COVID impact the state budget. They have a requirement to have a biennium budget that is a balanced budget. So if there is a projected deficit, the ability for us to get revenue from the state is limited. Another one is operating levies and referendum. We already know that we take advantage of the largest operating levy allowed by state statute. So we have limited areas to look for revenue. Something like advertising we think is pretty creative. And then specific fee, thinking about specific fees, considering would an increase in that fee be equitable? Would it be something, and as I think Val said something that I just really want to emphasize, is the amount of money that we're getting back from that increased fee worth what we would charge, the goodwill we might lose with some members of the community by feeling that we're passing along, you know, that kind of that kind of cost. So, like we said, our leadership team is not quite there yet on the fee part. We're continuing to discuss that. But those other ones, we think there are some specific things we really need to get rolling with if we're going to be able to get them for next year.
Excellent. Okay. So with that, board members' questions. Corey, did I see your hand? No, I'm sorry. Tom. And then I see Amy.
You need to just pull right down, Tom. There you go. That's all right, yes.
There's a supposed teacher shortage. Would we be able to replace these teachers? And if there's a shortage and we're competing, would that raise the starting salary? And has that been factored into the potential savings?
I'll take that, Val, if that's okay. You want me to take it?
Absolutely.
So as we have thoughtfully considered this, yes, there is clearly a shortage in all of these areas across the country. We believe that Northfield Public Schools is uniquely positioned at this point in time. Because we have not had to make a budget reduction for next year, but if we have people who retire, we will have positions open. That's what you're referring to. Can we fill those positions?
Right.
We know there are many districts in the state, who are doing multi-million dollars worth of budget reductions. In fact, several school districts, about half of the Big Nine, is going to be making some sizable budget reductions this year. We had the fund balance, right, to be able to make it through another year before we had to do major budget reductions. So, as we've said before, 80% of all school district budgets are salary and benefits. We know that unfortunately, Minnesota schools have tightened their belts since 1993. If we go back over 30 years, and I want to start my soliloquy about the basic formula and how it's not kept up with inflation, which I will spare you this evening. Districts there's nothing left to cut but people. So the fact is there are going to be lots of school districts that are releasing, considerable talent. And we stand ready to be able to potentially, I'm not going to use I prefer not to say taking advantage, but be in a position where we could have access to some high quality people to help join our team. We cannot replace the people who retire, right? You can't replace people, right? You can hire for the position. We would be losing some really good people going out the door. There's no question about that. But as we look forward to the future, we look at what we had said to you is that we would find some ways that would have limited impact on the student experience in the classroom. And we feel this is a bigger ticket item that we could do that would be helpful for our financial future while keeping the impact limited to the classroom experience.
Great, thanks.
Amy?
So, yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions and kind of a comment. My first question is, why is there a minimum of 10 teachers? Wouldn't just one teacher retiring early help our financial situation?
It does, yes. I would say there's a level of scale that's important. The cost savings from one is minimal with that kind of payout. But the more you add, the larger it gets. So we certainly could. That is, if that's something the board is interested in, we can absolutely change it. That was just, we had also had a minimum in 2011, and so we were mirroring that a little bit, just with the larger people.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of the people who sign up for it, and if there's only 7 or 8, but they've already started thinking that they're going to retire, but then they don't get any special benefits, that, how do we address that with those people?
Sorry.
Well, presumably they're all teachers that have been around forever and are great teachers, and we certainly want them to have a good experience leaving the district as well. So.
Yes, I believe in 2011 there was a clause that basically allowed them to rescind their retirement letter if they didn't meet the minimum, so that they wouldn't be held to that without the payment if we didn't meet that number. The minimum was 10 in 2011, and we only had 9, and the board voted that there was still enough of a cost savings for the district that they moved forward with it, so that is an option as well. But that's absolutely something that we can discuss, and there's nothing statutory or locked in about it. It was just the proposal that we had pulled together. But we can certainly look at doing that differently if the board is interested in that.
Well, I think too, Amy, it was about, as Val said, it was about getting enough people to come together so that we could guarantee a larger amount of savings. If it's just a handful of people, we may not be able to achieve the same kind of collective savings. And so by having a number, it really does force some reflection on, is this the time for me to consider this or not? And we don't bring this forward lightly, because one of the things we've had really good feedback about is that we retain people. right? People stay here for a long time because people describe it as a destination district for them to come and teach. And so we don't take this lightly because we know we are potentially letting out the door some very high quality long-term employees. But when we are charged with trying to take a look at the here and now and the future. And this is one tool that we think that we could use for the future that could have a positive impact on our financial standing moving forward.
Thank you for that. My second question is, with the arbiter pay proposal, if it saves us staff time, does that mean that that would allow us to reduce the number of staff? Is that where the savings comes in?
I would say there's, that could be a potential. We have to do an analysis about exactly how many officials we pay in that process. It could mean that they're able to do something else that they haven't been able to do, or to support some other process that they haven't been able to help with in the past. But it could mean a reduction in hours. It certainly wouldn't mean a reduction in an entire position. It would not equate to that much, but it could mean something like that. I honestly think just the savings of bank fees and postage and envelopes and toner, and just processing a check would almost cover that cost entirely, in addition to staff time.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to see how that works out, not knowing all the numbers and everything.
Yeah.
Certainly there are efficiencies there that make a lot of sense, but whether there are cost savings, that's the part I'm not completely understanding yet.
Yeah.
And then my last thing was just a comment, and that was on the fees, and it really just follows what you were saying, Dr. Hillman. We've worked so hard to eliminate fees, and I think in the past we felt that fees often disproportionately affect the lower income students that we have. You know, we got rid of the art fee, that was a huge thing, you know, and other fees that kept students from being able to participate. So I would want to be very, very careful in considering what fees we reinstate, and we don't want the parents to feel like we're nickel and diming them. We want the fees to be meaningful if that's possible, and just make sense at least. So that's my comments on that topic.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Claudia.
I also had a comment on the fees, and I agree with what you were saying, Amy. I guess I would just hope that with the credit card processing fee, if it would be optional to pay by credit card, or if you would only be able to pay by credit card, thereby guaranteeing that you're generating revenue off that credit card fee. So would there be an option to pay by check or in person, or would it only be a credit card payment?
Yep, all of our vendors that we use offer an option to pay by credit card or to attach your checking account, I believe. And typically the fee is lesser if you use your checking account versus a credit card. And the fees, I didn't go into a lot of detail because we're still discussing it as a team, but the vendors all have a wide variety of options. We can charge the full, it's typically a percentage of the total sale. We can charge the full percentage. We can cost share and say it's $1 surcharge per transaction, or any kind of combination in between. So there's lots, it's not us having to say it's 100% on them. It can be a shared thing, just we aren't there in that conversation, so I didn't go into all that detail, but there are lots of different avenues if that is something that we determine is worth more consideration. And we would never only require payment by credit card or online. We've typically always had a way for somebody to pay by cash or check if that was their only avenue.
All right, thank you. Other questions, comments? I just want to thank Val and the team for their work. I just think it's so excellent that we're looking at this in the near term, and budget containment. I think, budget reduction process is always very, very difficult. And one thing we're always charged with is, well, where are revenue opportunities? And here we can point to the community and show that we have searched and found revenue opportunities that will bring significant revenue. Although, they come at some intangible costs for sure. The one thing that I would say about the arbiter pay, and just one aspect of it, we know that getting officials is very difficult as well. There's just a shortage of them, and I just wonder within the Big Nine, as close as, and officials do travel, and I just wonder if they're, have a Red Wing or a Faribault where they can go officiate and get paid more promptly, if that isn't a motivation for them to maybe go to those districts. So we might be getting ourselves a little bit more competitive in terms of how efficiently we are able to pay our officials when we know it's a really competitive market. The other thing I wanted to clarify in talking with Dr. Hillman, for those who have already announced retirement, the early retirement package would still be given to them as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not, so it's those who, I think we have a handful now that have already, there's actually one
And it
in
would be
tonight's
for everyone
package.
who is retiring at the end of this school year.
Yes, so those who've announced would benefit from that as well. So we do look forward to bringing it back on March 8th. We understand there would be some areas where we would have some real numbers, but others where we would be asking for to come back, with maybe some more specifics, but in general, just saying that we'd be wanting to pursue those avenues. So thank you for this great work.
You're welcome. And then I did have one more thought that occurred to me after Tom's question. The one thing I did not mention is there is the possibility that we could just have cost savings through attrition. So anytime somebody retires, that's part of a process that we go to look at and say, is this position still needed? Is it in the right, all the right things? Do we want it to look this way moving forward? And there certainly could be opportunities where we wouldn't need to replace a person. They're probably fairly limited, but that is also one consideration for the staffing piece of it. I forgot to talk about that, so thank you for letting me add it on.
Thank you, Val. All right, so we'll go on to our next item for discussion, which is COVID-19 response and operations update. Dr. Hillman.
You bet. So this evening, what I'm going to share with you are items specifically around updates to the Safe Learning Plan. I'm going to give you a vaccination update. I'm going to talk very briefly about spring break. Talk a little bit about our anti-racism work, just to reinforce some training that we've recently did. And I also have one item that I did not include in the report. I just wanted to remind you from an operations perspective that we are currently working on the renewal of our school district laptop lease for teachers. And so that process is ongoing. We just got the lease paperwork late last week. We didn't feel it was ready to bring forward to you yet tonight. But I want you to know you will see that lease for the new teacher, the replacement of the current teacher laptops at our next meeting. And we are working with our preferred vendor at this point. The current lease that they are proposing is a 0% interest rate. We have to make sure that that would extend past the time of the board meeting in April that we would bring it to you for formal approval. So just, that was not included in my report, but I wanted to explain to you where we are at with that. So I want to briefly go through that. The governor, as you heard last week, announced some updates to the Safe Learning Plan that was widely reported as allowing students to come back full-time and in hybrid model. I really think that when you look at the Safe Learning Plan updates from the governor, mostly those updates were things that were encouraging to get school districts where the students had only been online all year in a distance learning model. There are several large school districts in the state where students in the middle school and high school had yet to be on campus in either in-person or hybrid. It was really intended to help give those schools a boost and be able to bring students back to campus. And as you all know, we were on campus with our students in-person at the elementary and hybrid at the secondary from September through mid-November. We then, like the rest of the state, most of the rest of the state I should say, had to take a pause because of the rise in COVID numbers. And then we've had elementary students back in person starting on January 19th, with middle school and high school students coming back in the hybrid model beginning on February 2nd. Just to make sure I said that right, elementary students in person starting January 19th, hybrid for secondary on February 2nd. So the key things that have changed in the Safe Learning Plan that impact us are reducing the physical distancing requirements for students at the middle school and high school from 6 feet to 3 feet. So in a hybrid model, or any kind of, you're required to have 6 feet of social distancing for the hybrid model, and it reduces that at the secondary to where you could go with 3 feet. So we are looking at that and determining, we are currently discussing the feasibility and the logistics of a plan to potentially return our middle school and high school students back to full in-person learning. There are many things that we have to dig into the guidance and really think through before we can make that final decision. Here's one real-world example. They have changed the physical distancing requirement to 3 feet, yet contact tracing requirements remain at 6 feet. One of the things that we've been very proud of is that the mitigation factors that we put into place at the middle school and high school have yielded very few close contacts who have had to quarantine other than the student who tested positive or the staff member who have tested positive themselves. Now, let's just hypothetically say that we bring back students in a full in-person model, and we are using the 3 feet requirement, which we're analyzing, can we actually make 3 feet work in every single classroom at the middle school and high school? It's not as easy as you might think. But let's just say that we did that. We had a classroom of, say, 30 students with 3 feet between them. But with the 6 feet contact tracing, if we had a student who was positive in that classroom, our administrators estimate that we would see 7 to 8 close contacts in each class period, which means one positive case could potentially send more than 50 students home for a minimum of a 10-day period. So the question that we have is, and we are really looking at the logistics because we know that we all want our kids back fully in person. I'm not sharing that as that's why we can't do it. I'm sharing we are trying to problem solve how can we do that. And with the cases continuing, I anticipate that we potentially could be under 20 cases in Rice County per 10,000. If it's not this Thursday, I feel for certain it'll be next Thursday because we've been watching the numbers, right? So the numbers are going in the right direction. We have a vested interest in getting kids back in person, but this is just an example of how the contact tracing radius and the minimum distance don't align, and where we could be sending quite a few kids home based upon one situation. So again, we're not saying that that's a hard stop barrier to this. What we're saying is that's the kind, it is not as simple as flip the switch, we're coming back next week, right? So we are considering a couple of different potential pathways to bringing students back at the middle school and high school fully in person. The other part that's important in the change is that they are continuing to reduce the importance of the county level data. And we're seeing the transition back to more of the influenza-like data. So I just want you to know we've had several strategy sessions to determine what would be the pathway, what would be the timeline, what's the other support we might need to provide the middle school and high school to be able to solve problems like the one I just explained, and then making sure if we have rooms where we can't get 3 feet, can we relocate that class to another area within the school to be able to get 3 feet guaranteed. So that's what we're working through. Want to give you a vaccination update. Wow. We are down to, Anita and I every Monday have to submit to Rice County how many more staff members do we think we have to be vaccinated. We submitted 3 today, or 4. Okay, 6, excuse me, 6. We were at 3 when we last talked, so we had 6 people. Now, some of these are substitutes who hadn't necessarily heard, that they needed to understand they needed to complete a form for us. It could be new employees that are being hired, but we want to just, again, we cannot thank Northfield Hospital and clinics enough. They have vaccinated over 600 of our staff members. So just great success. The first shot is in the vast majority of our staff members who wanted it. And we're down under, to think that we're under 10 people who want to be vaccinated who are still on our list is frankly nothing short of a miracle. And so thank you, Northfield Hospital and Clinics. You really made it happen. It's amazing, and we are forever grateful. I need to give you a heads up that remember that the COVID-19 vaccine is a 2-dose vaccine. And we are just paying very close attention because we do know that a small percentage of people after they get their second dose do experience symptoms. Now those symptoms mean that the vaccine is working. But it also, in some cases, can get to the point where a person's daily life may be impacted. So we are trying to get data. You know how I love to use data to make decisions. The data on this is not clear yet, right? Because we read what the clinical trials say. I talked to one district about maybe 2/3 of our size, where they had a total of 3 people miss work the day after their second dose. And in a neighboring district had 27 people out at one elementary school. So we are trying to look at, this is not the kind of thing that I can wake up on March 11th and go out and drive the country roads and say, we're not going to have school today. That's not the way this works. So we are really trying to dig in and talking to people who have had the experience. We did work to try to see if we could potentially move the day of the week of the shot. As you might have heard, the logistics around getting vaccine are a little complicated. So it isn't as simple as, well, just do the second shot on a different day. That's not the way this works. So we are looking and really trying to think through how do we handle when we have over half of our staff who are vaccinated on one day. We're trying to determine what kind of risk do we have and what is the kind of action that we would prefer to take proactively so that we are not disrupting people's lives because of something that happens one day after a vaccination. So I just want the board to know that's going to be a decision we're going to have to make, and we're going to probably have to make it without the level of data we normally would like. So you just need to be aware of that. Spring break. Everybody loves spring break. We are wholeheartedly asking people to just really think about their spring break travel. We've sent to all families to say, if you do choose to travel, we would not presume to tell you that you can or can't. That's not our role. But what we're asking people is to look at the MDE and the MDH guidance about if you do travel, what are the pieces that you need to be aware of? What do you need to think about when you come back? We know in the 10 days after the New Year's holiday, we had 21 cases at the high school. So we are trying to avoid that kind of circumstance, right, where we have an outbreak. So I just want people to know that we're humbly asking families to really think through what their spring break travel might look like this year, and also asking them to really consider some safeguards if they are to do that. So that is spring break. As I mentioned in our last meeting on a week ago, on February 15th, all of our staff participated in a 3-hour professional development session with our partners from Equity Alliance, Minnesota. And again, it worked on 3 different areas. It focused on structural, institutional, and interpersonal racism. It focused on racism's impact on students, and it also included strategies for disrupting racism. And so the key thing is that I've read all of the feedback from that. What I'll tell you is almost everyone had some really key takeaways in terms of what they were thinking about, what they could do, how they could use that information in their own work with students. So that was a very positive, another positive experience we had with Equity Alliance. We are continuing our work with them, targeting August 2021 for our next session. So that is my report this evening, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, comments, board members?
I have a quick one.
Yes, Amy.
I just want to thank you and your staff for your excellent organization of the whole vaccination process. And I think it means a lot to the staff, the community, certainly to the board, to everyone, that you're so good at organizing it and making that happen.
Well, I'm very grateful that you give us that credit. Anita and Cheryl and all the folks in the office who did a lot of work to make the connection between our staff and the entity who was doing the vaccination. Because when we talk about the efficiency of the vaccination process, that is 110% Northfield Hospital and Clinics. Those folks know what they're doing. They do it very well, and we were very pleased with the relationship that we have had with them. So our job was, frankly, compared to Northfield Hospitals, it was not simple, especially in the early moments of trying to connect people to when we were trying to fill 10 vaccination appointments, and then less than 2 weeks later we filled 308, right? So we did some work on our end, there's no question about it, but the real work happened at Northfield Hospital and Clinics, and we could not be more grateful to them for their efficiency.
Excellent. Other questions or comments? Okay. Well, one of my questions was what was some of this post-survey data on the teacher development, and it sounds like it was just a really great session, so thank you for that update.
You bet.
And I think what you really outlined and what the newspaper reports on the media around Governor Walz is just logistically, it's just not that easy to bring students back. Just for example, we had desks and storage and different things. So number of things that have to be reviewed before we can move to next step. But I think the point is we've had students back in hybrid. So some students are just returning this week from distance learning in other districts. So we have been fortunate in that regard. So thank you. Okay, so we can move on. That's our items for discussion. We can move on to committee reports. It's the second meeting of the month in which board members discuss some of the work done in their committees in which they are liaisons. In tonight's table file was a report submitted by Tom for Northfield Forward. So Tom, would you like to present the overview of your report?
Sure. So we met this past Monday the 15th, and sorry for not getting this in your packet earlier, so you would have had a chance to read it. So I don't know, should I read it all or just summarize? I mean, there was a lot of good information that the teachers, good feedback. So maybe I'll just read it quick. Julie Wallner and Teresa Wilson from the Business Education spoke first about their experiences, and they described how business courses have been fluid depending on current events in content and curriculum requirements. The flexibility of running their classes that way over the years have helped adapt their teaching in the pandemic. And they had several key takeaways. It's difficult to build strong relationships and connections with students via Zoom. It's difficult using Zoom to help struggling students. They had a goal of a C- or better, and that wasn't achievable under distance learning. Individual or small group presentations were not possible even in hybrid mode. They had the students present to the teacher over Zoom, and they still required the students to do that in a professional manner, in wearing clothes and how they handled themselves. They didn't do the Business Student of the Month award. Outside speakers, while it's a great thing to bring in an outside speaker, the students just viewed it as just another Zoom meeting. Students do not like to talk in Zoom meetings, and that was emphasized quite a bit. Field trips were canceled, content was reduced, and there was less opportunity to apply what they learned. Keyboarding and word processing was difficult for students who didn't have regular keyboards at home. One was provided along with an adapter to allow the use with an iPad. And they found that the EduTyping software proved to be an excellent program for home learning. DECA also suffered. Membership is down to 22 students instead of the usual 50 to 70. All meetings and competitions were virtual, no opportunities, so that took away the opportunities to interact with other students, either through the DECA store or a competition with other schools. The next teacher was Pat Riley, who teaches chemistry. While in school, during the hybrid time, the students did the hands-on experiences, so the labs. The presentations were eliminated, and the instruction time was and instruction time was given the priority while in class. So his key takeaways were to record everything. That enables the opportunity to view it repeatedly or at the student's convenience. It also provides a record for the instructor. He and other science teachers looked at their curriculum and labs to see what they needed to do and why. For example, try and cut down the number of labs that they had to do. They realized that, well, maybe they don't need to repeat one from the middle school. He and the other teachers determined to teach chemistry without memorization. And as a student, I would say yes. And also with the looking at the curriculum, it sounded like they maybe would look at it in general to see maybe things need to be changed or modified. There's a Pivot interactive software that works well for labs. There was concern whether that program would read the text aloud for those with reading difficulties, especially with science words. And then the final presentation was by Eric Burton. He works with EL Portage students, and he has a varied background, which gave him a broad spectrum of resources to work with. And again, he reiterated that relationships are hard to build. Following up and checking in is important, and he found that the use of instant communication like texting is valuable, so you can get communications right away if you have a question. Different students have different backgrounds that need to be considered. And though some students have strong conversational English, reading comprehension may not follow that. Portage has reading at a higher level of expectations, and so again, your reading comprehension is important. Odyssey Ware is rigorous but customizable. Motivation is difficult to find, making building relationships all the more important. It's important to reconsider what is done out of habit. We've always done it that way, but maybe that's not what we should do. And again, as is so often stressed by everybody, the relationships and connections are so important. So it was packed, and we ran right up till to the end. But if anybody has any questions, comments?
Great report. I mean, it highlights a lot of the issues that we know Hope and her group are working on as they look more long-term to Portage, some of the distance learning challenges that they would address. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for the report, Tom. I'm going to start the next report, the Legislative Action Committee report, and I would invite Claudia and Corey to make any comments as well. I'll just kind of give a high-level overview of where the legislature's at. We know there's a long way to go, but at this juncture, single bills are being heard in committee, both House and Senate. Most of them, bills are being laid on the table for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. So their work is just really reviewing those bills and saying, yeah, there's something we can consider, so let's lay it on the table and we'll think about whether it should go in the omnibus bill. Committee deadlines are important as they are approaching. All policy bills must be out of committee by March 19th and any finance bills by April 9th. Very, very key date, of course, is the February forecast, of which is an indication of where we are. We know the last forecast from the state, there was a $1.3 billion deficit. So this coming Friday, February 26th, we will is the release of the February forecast. Revenue indicators seem very hopeful that the state's financial forecast will be much improved. Apparently there's been a significant amount of sales revenue that has been generated. There was on NPR today, actually, they were interviewing Governor Walz and just really indicating a very hopeful view of the February forecast. So we'll see how that comes through. Key bills to watch right now. I think we talked about this one as part of our COVID update at our last board meeting, is the House and Senate files that give $83 million for summer programming. And the work right now that the Legislative Action Committee has done, and our C folks and MSBA people are really pushing legislators to get that out of committee and get it on the House and Senate floor and approve it, and have it signed into bill by Governor Walz, so that school districts have the opportunity to take those dollars and plan appropriately. So we hope that that will happen. There's actually conversation that the next action alerts might be for school districts to reach out to leadership, Representative Portman and Senator Gazelka, go all the way to the top to say this has to get done. Part of that bill also is enrollment, which we know whether they allow us to use the 2019 enrollment or 2020 enrollment, because we know the declining enrollment that districts, even ourselves, have experienced. So key bill. Of course, then we're always watching the 2% increase to the basic fund formula in the House. There is no Senate companion bill yet, but we all know how the basic fund formula and the importance to our districts, so that's one that's important. Of course, the other one that we were made aware of this week is House file, both the House and Senate companion authors, Representative Lippert and Senator Draheim, are supporting as money for Northfield Healthy Community Initiative. And that's $250,000, so it's significant revenue for the work that HCI knows and has contributed significantly to our district work. Thank you to Claudia. She sent through the link. We had a freshman torch student testify at the committee hearing last week, and she just did an amazing job talking about how instrumental the torch program has been for her, and it was just quite a moving testimony. So that took place. I know that next Wednesday, Zach Pruitt has lined up some time with both Representative Lippert and Senator Draheim for Council Champion leadership to talk about how important those dollars are. So we'll see that come through. Lastly, and then I'll give obviously Corey and Claudia opportunity to comment as well. The policy bills, as we know, unfunded mandates. So we are always concerned about the number of policy bills that are moving through and that there's real cost to all of those. So we're hoping that we have an opportunity to weigh in on what those costs really are before they would become part of the omnibus bill. So working, of course, with, and as board members you're seeing through MSBA and C, the action alerts that are coming through on a number of this important legislation with real deadlines looming, and the Legislative Action Committee is trying to respond to all of those action alerts as they come through. So legislators are hearing from board members, which is really important, and we'll see how that type of advocacy will ultimately help the process. So Claudia and Corey, if you have any comments to add.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. So I had the opportunity to speak with Representative Lippert today for about 30 minutes and got to introduce myself to him, and we got to know each other, talked about a number of things over those 30 minutes, a lot of which you just discussed, which was good. But just to recap our conversation, we talked specifically about House File 843, which was the funding bill that's going through the committees right now, and I'm glad to report that Representative Lippert has signed on as a co-author of that bill, so he is definitely supportive of that. Just a reminder though, he's one of 134 legislators in the House, so we have one advocate. Hopefully he can double that and keep doubling it. We also discussed House File 1064, which is a summer program you just alluded to. It seems like he's supportive of that, but still needs to do a little more research on that. And then he also shared his concern over programming that's not being funded from federal government and other places. So he is definitely responsive and receptive to the challenges facing districts and is supportive of the idea of getting us more dollars, which I'm sure we're all happy to hear. The balance of the time, we just talked really about funding, equity, and a little bit about mental health as well, and challenges over the last year with students. Both of us have students in the school system here in Northfield, so we shared that in our experiences. So it was good to get to know him on that human level and not just through a title. So that was good. And I explained to him about what we're doing here with the Legislative Action Committee, and he's excited to hear about that. And told him that we'll be probably pretty vocal moving forward and are looking forward to working with him and establishing that relationship.
Excellent, thank you, Corey. Claudia, anything to add?
Yeah, just really excited to, be in on what's happening at the Capitol and to hear some of the finance files that are coming through. Also was excited I didn't realize that Xochitl Valdez, a 9th grader, was going to be sharing her testimony at that hearing for the funding source for Torch. And I was thinking about her testimony again this evening. She shared a very moving personal story, and she talked about how important Torch was and is for her. But she's not talking about the program. She's talking about those teachers and volunteers that are present. And that funding is going to keep those people in her life, So this is exciting to hear how that kind of dry, budget talk at the Capitol actually is impacting a 9th grader here in Northfield, and many other students, obviously. Some other House files that were interesting to me and that I wanted to just quickly share. There's a teacher mentor program that's being talked about, and that one actually got passed. And so they're going to be requiring districts to have a mentorship program for new teachers in the district. And that's part of that whole equity movement at the Capitol of keeping and retaining teachers of color, needing to have that valuable mentorship early on in their career for retaining and also attracting. And there's a big act, Teachers of Color Act, that's House File 217, that's coming through, and that one has the goal of having an increase of teachers of color increased by 2% every year for the state of Minnesota. So that's also really exciting. Lots of good stuff. You'll hear from us again and again.
Thank you. Well, I think Claudia raises a really good point. When the best way to advocate is really the personal stories of, students coming forward and board members and superintendents saying, here's what this legislation will mean. So why it's very top level, obviously, for them. It's very impactful when they can hear the stories behind how that legislation will impact the district. So good. Well, thank you. Tom.
Just a question, any update on House File 292 about the referendums? And having to renew those?
That one is, let's see, I do have an update on that one. That one is in the House. I'm not sure if that has a Senate companion or not. But that is one that we know C and MSBA are pushing very hard. It almost came through last legislative session, but then was pulled out, which was of great disappointment to MSBA because they put a lot of work into that. And basically the track record, again, the story behind that is districts overwhelmingly renew existing levies, but the cost to districts to communicate that and the some of the the information and the literature and the time and the effort, and so there is hope again that this session that one will come through. But is there a Senate companion to that, Corey?
Yeah, it looks like it was introduced and referred to the Education and Finance Committee last month. It hasn't been addressed again since then, but it's added 4 co-authors. There is not a current Senate companion bill.
Yeah, which I'm sure they're working on getting a senator to carry that bill, but I know MSBA is working on that one very, very hard, so thanks for asking about that one. Any other questions? We will be here often talking about, I think in March 8th board meeting, we will have an update since we only have one board meeting in March, and that will be the February forecast, so we'll want to talk about that for sure. Okay, thank you. All right, so that is it for committee reports. We can move on now. We are at the consent agenda. There were a few personnel items in the table file that to be added to the consent agenda. So you're aware of that. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Corey. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to items for individual action. We have quite a few this evening. We have 6 items for individual action. So the first item is the proposed sale of district property. So the way I'll proceed with our items for individual action, I will ask for a motion and a second, and then we will have time for question and discussion before vote. So we know the proposed sale of the district property. We discussed it at length at our previous board meeting. So is there a motion to approve the option agreement as presented? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Okay, we have an opportunity now for questions and comments, board members. Amy.
I just want to thank Dr. Hillman for adding the clause about the purchase agreement shall also contain provision requiring buyer to cooperate with the seller. And so the safety clause, I really feel heard, and I like how you worded it, so thank you for including that.
You bet.
Other questions or comments? Corey.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the board discussion over this last meeting we had. Just want to reiterate that I still think it's a little premature to sell this because there's no official documents filed with the city yet. If we're thinking safety first, the best option for the district is not to have any traffic flow on the Lincoln. And if this project ultimately could be built without any traffic on the Lincoln, it's a slim margin. I understand that. That would be my preference. But I understand the will of the board would probably approve this tonight. I just want to say I appreciate the discussion. And we'll look forward to working with you all to make it the safest project we can moving forward from our standpoint. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay. I plan to support this motion. I think Claudia made a really excellent point at our board meeting, our prior board meeting, that this land is really a liability for the district, and we have an opportunity to sell this land at a fair price. And I think as a district, we have a strong track record of working in tandem with the city in terms of safe crossings for our students, namely at Sibley, Northfield Middle School, and Northfield High School. And we know that we have no reason not to think that partnership will continue with the city. So acknowledge that we will work through those traffic issues because we know that is of paramount importance to the city and to the district. So without any other questions or comments, I will ask for the vote. One thing I will do outside of our normal voting procedure, I typically don't call for abstentions. Tonight I will, because board member Tom Baraniak had indicated that was his intent to do on this vote. So to in potential personal conflict he had with the proposed sale of the district property. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
Abstention, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We can move on now to policy 424 and policy 425 is presented at our February 8th board meeting. So is there a motion to approve those two policies, 424 and 425 as presented? Moved by Amy, is there a second? Second by Corey. Any questions or comments on these two policies? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to renaming of Sibley Elementary School. Again, great discussion last week on the renaming of the school. So is there a motion to approve Sibley Elementary School to be renamed Spring Creek Elementary effective July 1st, 2021? The district will also ensure that acknowledgement of the building's history and the area's connection to Indigenous peoples through a historical marker at the school. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Claudia. Is there a second? Second by Corey. Questions or comments? Yes, Claudia.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment about it. I did have a parent approach me about naming the school Spring Creek Elementary. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared her comment, and that was just that it's very close in name to Prairie Creek, and she was concerned that there might be some confusion with the two names, fundraising, advertising, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to bring that to you.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
As an official townie, I also want to, I grew up here and went to Longfellow, and I went to Greenville, and of course it was across the street. Sibley School was our rival, and I just want to, for the almost 60 years of Sibley School, I just want to honor the past and honor the future of the new Spring Creek, and just put that on the record. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Jeff. Any questions or other questions or comments? Amy?
I just want to, making noise, just say I think it's really important that we have an historical marker, the mini museum. Also, I think those are two separate things. And that we talk about the history of the school, both the Wakapute history and the Sibley history. I think there's a lot of learning, educational opportunities there. And so I want to encourage the administration to proceed forward with that and to make that happen, because my comments, I've talked to a number of people and everyone's worried about losing the history, and that's a promise that we're going to keep the history and we're going to teach the history, and I just want to make sure that that's on the record.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's all right. I just wanted, and I think that maybe Matt can make a comment to this too, because it's the same point of what we're doing here as far as the ideas that you had to honor something in the hallway regarding the Longfellow and the history, and I think that that same process, we can do at Spring Creek to just have something in there, just so, and that is the educational experience. I mean, history is both good and bad. So if we can, when you're talking about that, doing the same thing here, can you expand a little bit before we bring that into what your thoughts are for doing that?
Yeah, so we've been, we started by working with Earl Wyman, who is the director of the SCOPE program at the middle school that has involved students in writing their own, actually writing history, if you will. And so Earl has a couple of former students who are helping us with this, and I really, both the historical marker we've talked about both inside, and now we're even considering things that are outside the building. I've got the names of some vendors that do the kinds of displays like you might see on a trail, right? So that we can have some historical, educational presentations both inside and outside the school building. And I think this is something we'll see expand to all schools, to talk a little bit about the history of the school, and in this case with Sibley, to honor all of the different grade configurations that it had over the years, honor the connection that the land has with Wapakute, also to understand why was it originally named Sibley, why at some point was it changed, what were the reasons behind that. So making sure that we give it this full breadth of not only the broader history, but also that very local history about who are the kids that have gone to that school over the years. And so the way I envision it is it's in a public place where people are able to see when they enter the building, thinking about what's the right and appropriate place. And then in some circumstances looking at having something outside of the school as well. So we have already started that work. Talking with Earl about that a couple of months ago, and we'll continue forward, and I would anticipate that we'll have that ready for the beginning of next school year, if not before.
Thank you, Matt. Well said.
All right, we have a motion and a second to rename Sibley School Spring Creek Elementary effective July 1st, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to our next item for individual action. That is the operating capital and long-term facility maintenance budget. So is there a motion to approve the 2021-2022 operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance budget as presented? Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Tom. Questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year plan. Is there a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year revenue and expenditure plan and the indoor air quality management plan? Moved by Corey. Is there a second? Second by Tom. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our last item for individual action is one we do every year, is required as a timeline for making any programming and staffing adjustments for next year. So is there a motion to authorize the administration to make recommendations for additions and reductions in programs and for adding or discontinuing positions? Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Any questions or comments? This is not specifically that there would be program reductions or staff reductions. It just allows the staff to, our administration to bring those forward. Did I get that?
Yep, that is correct. It really just authorizes us to make sure that we are looking at enrollment and looking at how FTE matches with enrollment, and it's a part that we have to do to be able to make sure we follow any timelines should there be any positions that are either reduced in part or entirely.
Okay. This is a resolution, so it requires roll call vote.
Brania,
Aye.
Butler,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Motion carries. So that is our items for individual action this evening. We have no items for information tonight, so I will move on to future meetings. We do only have one meeting in March. That is Monday, March 8th. April then, our meetings are Monday, April 12th and Monday, April 26th, all at 7 p.m. in the Northfield School District Office Boardroom. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.